when someone dies, angels come. And these angels are in many forms, and one of the forms is the human form. And one of the angels that had come into my life, not once but on two occasions, when two very dear people in my life passed away, was Auntie Y. The first time was shortly after my firstborn child, Heather Rose, passed away. And in that 7 years between her passing and me having the final relief from the pent-up grief through my first Sudarshan career experience, the only interaction with anyone which had given me a feeling of peace and contentment was my interaction with Auntie Y. And I found myself at a marae. And at this marae was Auntie Y. And I can't even remember what she said, but simply her demeanour, her deportment, her understanding of family and the spirit realm allowed me to feel, at least in that moment, content with Heather Rose passing, and that I was in the presence of someone who deeply knew and understood me, but not just knew and understood me and empathised with my tragedy, but treated it as normal and a part of life, with neither trivialising it nor over-dramatising it. She treaded that middle path with such love and compassion, and it left a deep impact on me. And then she appeared in my life a second time, by surprise, at my father's funeral, which transformed into a tangi, a one-day tangi. And thanks to her presence, it turned out she was close friends with a close friend of my father, which I didn't know. So there she turned up at my father's funeral. She arranged a haka for him. She held the energy of the group. She allowed my father's mother to speak, as was the proper way, and to say her piece, and to speak about the misgivings she had about his body going back to England, and to have her voice. And I respected her deeply for allowing her, for her acknowledgement of Granny, and she even called her Granny. She understood what would happen after a person would die, and she understood that arguments, in this case around the burial of the body, were just a part of how people showed respect for the loved ones, and we had that argument too, and I was involved in it also. And during that tangi, she came up to me and said, "Daniel, people have been asking me, now that your father, who was a great teacher, has gone, who's going to continue his teachings?" And I've told everyone, it's you. And that was all she needed to say to trigger my resignation a few months later from the technology company I was leading at the time, because I knew she was right. I knew that that was only ever intended to be a project to help a friend, but it had turned into a life, and I got attached to it. And I got attached to the media adulation, and I got attached to the title, and I got attached to thinking that I was someone who I wasn't. It wasn't my dharma to be the CEO of a tech company. It was my dharma to follow my father's spiritual teachings and to empower people to continue the work that he had begun. And so when she said that, I knew she was right, and that removed the last traces of self-deception. And I announced to my board that I would leave later in the year when I'd found a chief executive to replace me. And they weren't happy. They said, "You've created this company, how can you leave it?" And I told them not that I'd had a meeting with Auntie Y, who had told me that I wasn't living my dharma, but that I wasn't the right person for the next stage of the growth of the company, and we needed someone da-da-da-da-da-da. I told them what I thought the language that they needed to hear was. And in reality, it was right. because part of my vision was this company would create technology and research tools that would help scientists to prevent illnesses such as cancer. But I realized that it was going to take millennia using our tools, and there were more immediate ways to help people here and now, not just at the layer of the body, but at every layer of our existence. And sure enough, a few days later, I was on that plane to start my journey. She showed me and she pointed to my Dharma. She was a true seer. And that was not the final time she was to make an appearance in my life. After coming back from India and having the Art of Living 25-year anniversary, then we were told, have the 25-year anniversary celebrations in your own country. And I remember being invited in to be part of the core organising committee for this event. And someone said, we really need someone who's going to be the master of ceremonies for this event, who's going to host it, who's going to hold the energy for it. And I said, Auntie Y would be perfect. And I described who she was, and everyone agreed, to my surprise. And they said, yes, she would be perfect. Well, we'll leave it to you. You go and contact her. And I contacted everyone I knew. I contacted the friend of my father's. I contacted others. I went through old numbers of hers, mobiles and home phone numbers. I could not get in touch with her. I spent a week trying. And I remember being on the train after I'd finally decided to give up, and that I was going to have to go back to the organising committee and say, sorry, I've let you down, probably not for the first time. My enthusiasm has run ahead yet again of my ability to execute. I'm sorry, not only have I failed to get her, but I've delayed everyone a week. So I was feeling bad, I was beating myself up. And I looked down, and I remember thinking this very thought, and then I looked up, and there, 1.5 meters away from me, looking me straight in the eye, on the train, was Auntie Y. She said, Kia ora, Daniel. And as if it was the most perfectly natural thing in the world to have her suddenly materialise there, I said, Kia ora, Auntie Y. I've been looking for you. Ah, kapai, kapai. What is it, Daniel? As if she knew full well, and was just saying, hey, I'm moved by a different form of connection. And she hosted that event, and she held the energy. And that was to start an involvement of Māori in Art of Living, which embraced the key similarities between the ancient traditions of India and of the tangata whenua of Aotearoa, which is linked through the ha, the breath. As we know, haka means breath of fire, and aroha literally means pathway to love, pathway of the breath. In other words, the path of the breath leads to love. Aroha, pathway of the breath, means love. That was the final time I was to see her. The next time I inquired into her whereabouts, she was in the next world. But she left her mark, not once but 3 times. People show up at the right time to help us in our path. There are many angels. I've talked about other ones. Sometimes our angels are in another world, and sometimes they're in this world. And what I've learnt slowly over time is to realize that they're around us all the time, in every form, in the mundane and on the metaphysical level. And the more that we can open ourselves up to receiving their wisdom, the more that it'll come in the most strange and bizarre and unexpected times imaginable, but always at the perfect time, holding us in this complete blanket of protection and grace. So, have faith. Whatever you're going through in life, there is a power in you that is more powerful than the obstacles. And even at the times of hard times, the times of people's passing, this is when the angels double their workload.